What's going on, guys? I'm doing the small account update. I did not do it last week or the week before that, actually, because I was a little bit busy and I just decided to kind of disconnect a little bit. So, this is going to be covering the last 2 weeks of trading here. There's some good, there's some bad, but overall, I do want to just kind of touch on a couple things and just kind of talk to you guys, let you guys know where my head's at. So the last 2 weeks, listen, it has been challenging. I will admit, especially on the small account. I mean, the regular account, not really as bad, but obviously with the small account, little paper cuts, really you feel those more, right? And that's for the most part what happened, right? So we really looking at here, right? We really only had like one quote decent loss, which was in Alibaba, and I'm actually going to cover that in detail shortly. But looking at the rest of these trades, they were really just paper cuts. I mean, if you look at some of these trades, we kind of just got stopped out before the trade happened. Certain were just, really great setups that failed. Part of it did have to come into the fact that the market was a little irrational with the chop, but ultimately that's, what we signed up for. That's what we do as traders. We just happen to get the short end of the stick there a little bit, right? And, a couple of trades maybe mismanaged, like, for example, the one trade in phase. Not necessarily mismanaged. I mean, it had a crazy dump. It dropped like 40% in a couple of days. But maybe what I should have done is, just kind of close it out once we got back to break even. I kind of had the idea of, what, we never really use much buying power. We always have tons of buying power left over because I try not to do too many plays, right? So if you look here, we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 trades basically in 10 days. So about one a day. I know a couple of them we had shares and shares and options in them, but give or take about one a day. And so I was like, let me just park some cash in phase. That ended up not working. So that's kind of a lesson learned. Like, don't force a trade just because you want to use some cash. Like, we also had a trade in space where we used shares. Where I was fine with that. I planned it out, good R to R. We stopped when we needed to, and it was a small loss, and that's really just what happened. Like, listen, the week before, we had a monster week, and so here's the positive side of this, right? Which is actually really funny, is that before 2 weeks ago, this is pretty much where our account was, right around like 13.75, and we made about $270 one week, give or take. So now in one solid week, we made $270, where we had basically 2 weeks where pretty much everything that could have went wrong, and we basically lost those gains. So yes, we are still negative just because we started at a little bit of a deficit, but just goes to show you that two pretty shitty weeks, and these aren't just like weeks. They're pretty bad. I'm being honest with myself. Basically canceled out with one good week. So the good news is we can battle back. As you see, all the losses were controlled besides Baba, which is a little bit larger than I wanted to take, but I'm going to go over that in 1 second. And besides that, if you look at this, we didn't have anything that was really irresponsible, irrational, just paper cuts. And I will say it could have been a lot worse if we didn't manage them correctly. But we were sized correctly, managed them correctly, stopped when we needed. And so basically we lost, a nice week of gains in 2 weeks, which, if you're going to lose, that's kind of what you want to do. You want it to be controlled. So if you look, if you spread out 16.86% over 10 days, it was about 1.6% of the account every day that we were down. So on average, that's not too bad. So I'm gonna talk about a couple trades here. I'll talk about Space, Baba. So we'll kind of hop into it here. So this is the trade in Baba, and so we entered next week calls, meaning which were this previous week, right here on this day right here. I wanted a daily close underneath 104. We got the daily close under 104, but then unfortunately we gapped up from 103.6 all the way to 106 basically, right? We did push higher, but ended up going lower. We closed at like 104.75. So we were only about a dollar and change higher, right? So then the next, and I didn't add to that position because I don't like really averaging down unless the chart tells me to. At this point in time right here, the chart didn't tell me to. So then the next day happened. We did get a gap down to 103.5, and we got all the way down to 101.9. But the problem is because now this is 2 days later, time decay came into play. And at this point, actually, we were still down because we had the 100 puts. We had the 100 puts with about 3.5 days to go. But because of the theta, of 2 days now or a day and a half passing, we actually weren't even up. We were almost break even. And I was going to take it off at break even, but we ended up having, I'm actually going to go back to this day. So this right here was Tuesday. If we go back, and I'll show you what happened on Tuesday. right? We opened up, we gapped down, and this is the 2-minute chart, keep in mind. We gapped down to 103.5, had a pretty decent sell-off here, but then we came down to like 101.8 when we were almost break even, and we just rocketed right back up. Within 2, 4, 6, 8 candles, we were almost back at the open. Sorry, 8 minutes, 4 candles, we were almost back at the open. And, we basically went sideways the rest of the day here. We basically went sideways the next day, Wednesday. Thursday, we actually did make a little bit of a move up before erasing it. And then unfortunately, I had to close this position out because at the time my stop was above 103.5. We had an hour close above it. And so I stopped out. But then it did make the move. We actually still would have been slightly down, maybe almost break even, right, from our ad. But we had the 100 puts and our break even was like 99, low 99s or something like that. So we still wouldn't have even made the gains, But as far as the technical standpoint, it did make the move we wanted. It did make the move we wanted down to like that 99 area. We got to a low of like 99.25. And so the reason why I stuck with the trade longer than I could have or should have is because I was looking at this HSI, which is the Hang Seng, the Chinese index. And so we actually triggered, it'll be easy to show you like this, we actually triggered a trend flip here on the daily right here, which was on Tuesday. So that's why I held on to the trade, and we ended up actually dropping lower, and we did make the move eventually, but we ran out of time. And so it was a tough decision, right? And like looking back, it's obviously easier in hindsight. But at this point right here, I was debating just closing. I think we were down like 25 or 30%, so just a small loss, and we were only half size. It really wasn't a big deal. But I was debating closing here and getting next week contracts. But same strike, but next week. But we had earnings this week. We have earnings on Thursday, I believe. Yep, Thursday. And so because of that, the contracts were like 6 times the price that they currently were, and I wasn't going to pay that. And then I was thinking, okay, at this point right here, we were around like 104.8. We have the 100 puts. Maybe I'll roll them, but instead of rolling them with time, I'll roll them with the strike. So instead of having hundreds for this week, I was thinking about getting 105s. But then I'm like, you know what? The chart still doesn't tell me that I should do that. And so because of that reason, I decided not to do that because I didn't want to have more premium at risk, even if it means I missed out on the trade, right? Sure enough, that was the right answer. But if you look at the next day, we had a green hammer, potential failure to go lower, even though the HSI was setting up a sell signal, which is why I held, right? So based on this chart, though, it was kind of giving us conflicting signals, whether to add or not. Sure enough, we gapped down with an inside bar. Then we had a failure to go higher here before finally, on the final day of the contract expiration, we made the move that I was hoping for a couple days previous. So that was just a little bit of an unfortunate circumstance there. Another trade I want to talk about was Space here. And so looking at the daily here, I longed Space right here. And I'll just set it up for you again. I longed it at like around here, whatever it was. And my stop loss was below here. And my first take profit was up here. I think it's 6.5, give or take. Something like that. So we ended up actually stopping out, but the R to R was pretty good, and so that's why I opted to do it with shares. This was really nothing too crazy with it. If you look, though, we actually stopped out at a good time, because if we didn't stop out, as you see, we would have went way lower, another 10-15% lower, which obviously we didn't want to have. It ended up, making the move after, a couple down days. It had a huge couple days for some crazy reason with increased volume. So maybe we'll revisit this, above this like 650 area if we get a strong close or something like that, and maybe finally work our way back up here. And maybe this was my ultimate goal. This gap fill up here, but we'll see what happens there. And now just going back briefly to our account. The rest of these trades, there's nothing too notable to go over. Just a couple failed setups, a couple stop hunts. I talked about Fates, talked about Baba, and that was really it. So, if you want to take the negative is, we're kind of back to where we were a couple weeks ago. The positive, you saw what one good week of trading can do to the account, and you saw now what 2 bad weeks can do, and it wasn't even necessarily bad trading. I still would take the same setups. It just happened to be that we had a bunch of losses in a row. And, even with a high win percentage, you never know how the losses are going to come, how the wins are going to come. The previous week we went 8-0, and then the last 2 weeks combined, I think we went like 4-7 or something like that. So you never know how the wins and losses are going to come. That's why you have to be prepared for everything and have a plan. Because as you can see, like I mentioned, we're down 16% the last couple weeks here on the account, which, was we were up 16%, give or take, maybe even a little bit more on the account. And a couple good weeks will get us back to where we want to be and higher. And this isn't going to be easy, but hopefully, at the very least, we're using this time to learn from our mistakes, learn and be better traders, and really get into a good routine when it comes to stopping out and looking for entries. Because if we didn't have proper entries, we didn't have proper stops, proper risk management, let's see how many losses. We're not going to count this trade. This was basically break even. So we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 trades. So we were basically 1-9 on this account. We're not going to count this. We got stopped out and then it went to the moon, unfortunately. So we were basically 1-9, and we only lost 16% of the account. In my opinion, that's not too shabby. That's proper risk management. So we'll get them this week. We'll get back on track, feeling much better mentally, and we'll get after it. I'll see you guys.